We're grateful that you would join us today. Elder Tanner, we're grateful for you. Just a reminder on the page you're looking at, we have virtual family help available Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday until 6 p.m. on Friday. So if you need any help, please come and join us and we'll get a missionary to help you. Okay, Elder Tanner, we'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about, I guess you would call it a moderately serious topic. Can you avoid digital death? I just checked to see how many places people talk about digital death on the internet, and there are quite a few. It's a kind of a topic, but in the context of genealogy, it has quite a little different meaning than it does if you're an insurance salesman, for example, or something else like that. So we have to face the reality that neither we nor our computers will live forever. Hopefully we outlive our computers, but chances are that one or the other of them will go. Over the years, I mean many years, extraordinarily long years, the fact that I have lost data due to a crashed storage device, such as a floppy disk or a computer or a hard drive or any other data depository, any place else on a computer that has electrical connections, I have basically become almost what you would call immune to that process, because I either back up to the point where it's highly unlikely ever to happen, or on the other hand, I simply go, oh dear, well, that's too bad, and start over again. So it can be a tremendously, especially if you spend a lot of work on one project and all of a sudden realize the entire project has been lost and you have to start over again. So that can be pretty difficult. So what happens? You have to think about this. What will happen to all your digital work sitting on computers and storage devices? And let me give kind of some examples. Someone I know fairly well came and said, I lost my flash drive. What can I do? And the answer is, what was on it? Well, I'm not really sure, but whatever it is, it's now lost. And the answer is, start over. Whatever it is that you were doing, you're going to have to do over unless you had it backed up to some other device and can find your backup copy. And so if you start thinking and going through any of one of the electronic devices, whether it's an iPad, we just did, not within the last couple of weeks, we sat down, my wife and I sat down with one of our friends, and we're helping them get a new computer. And meanwhile, they decided to hand us their iPad, which was not working. And by the time we left, it really wasn't working. Because the only solution to the iPad non-function was to reset the entire iPad and lose everything on the iPad. Now, I've evolved over the last few years. One of the main ways to avoid a lot of those problems is to not store useful information on anything other than designated storage devices like hard drives, or if we do have a flash drive that you're using as a storage device or whatever. So for example, if I'm carrying a flash drive around and doing work on it, if I even begin to believe that I'm going to be able to preserve that work, I copy it to my computer and onto another disk if it's going to be backed up. Now, the standard setup for working with my computer is to have multiple hard drives backing it up, and a main hard drive that backs up everything on the computer all day long, every day. And I'll talk about that particular way of doing that. And then in addition to that, have an online service that backs up all the hard drives and all the computer every day, all day long. So basically, I have external in the cloud, if you want to refer to it that way, out there in a commercial service. I have physical hard drives. I have the hard drive on my computer, and I have the hard drive that I'm backing up my computer with. So these are that's the basic setup. Do I lose data? Occasionally, a file will crash, even though it's backed up, and even though I cannot find it again. So I do have to start over and with a file if a program itself crashes and I can't find what data was created. Okay, so let's kind of move along and see what this kind of means. The real question to ask is, what can you afford to lose? If it doesn't matter to you, if you don't care at all about what's on your computer, you never put anything on your computer, you never enter any data, you never spend any time, then basically you're not at risk because you don't have anything. It's like being poor. It's like if you don't own anything, you don't need insurance. Perhaps, but I mean, I'm sure insurance people would argue otherwise. But basically, it's a question of what you would can afford to lose. Now, another way to look at this is to look at it from the standpoint of what could happen. What is it that out there that might be a problem with your data on your computer? Now, let me give a qualifying thing here. Let's suppose that you're working on one of the major online genealogy websites. You're working on Family Search, you're working on MyHeritage or Ancestry or Find My Past or whatever. So when you're working on one of those websites, technically the information you're putting in there is not on your computer. It's out there on that website and it's stored. It's easy to see that by simply going to an unconnected computer, like in the Family History Library or BYU Family History Library, or any computer, a computer at your brother's or sister's or parents' house or wherever, and log in to Family Search or Ancestry. There's your data. It's right there. You haven't lost anything. You've moved to another computer. So the more information in genealogical standpoint that you put into an online program, in a sense, the more secure the basic part of your information becomes. And those of us who understand the mechanics and the reality of the online world trust Family Search because they have a vested interest in preserving the data, first of all, and will go to extraordinary efforts to try to keep it preserved. So the more information you take from your information and put into an online program, the more likely it is to be preserved. Now, at this point, we need to talk about some other things that can happen. So let's get here. The first one, obviously, is a computer crash. Computers today are amazingly accurate, amazingly reliable, and they run for an amazing period of time. The average lifespan of a computer is about 6 years. That means that after 6 years, you have a ever increasing exponential curve upward possibility that your computer will cease to work. So what's the alternative? Well, the answer is you have to upgrade. You need to get a new computer or a new device, or you make sure every last thing you ever do is backed up onto hard drives and you just keep working. Now, that's usually not the case. That's not what I find out there. I find people working on their computer, they have no backup, they have no hard drive, they don't even use a flash drive to store any data. And everything that they're personally doing on their computer is at risk to be lost. And that's kind of the biggest. Hard disk crashes, hard disks, when I say that there was a 6-year life on computers, The actual part of the computer that has that 6-year life is the hard drive, the internal hard drive on the computer. Have I ever had an internal hard drive on my computer crash? The answer is how many times? Do you want to know about? And I have replaced them on occasion. And fortunately, I have external hard drives that back up my whole computer, as I have already mentioned. And the crash is nothing more than a really bothersome inconvenience because of the amount of information that I usually have on my computer that takes usually it's the same thing if I buy a new computer. It takes usually 4 to 5 days to transfer all the information to the new computer or new hard drive, and it takes a month or 2 to get everything worked with all the recorded things that I needed to have recorded, like passwords and things like that. What about SSD or flash drives or thumb drives or whatever you want to call them? Well, SSDs are turning out to be more reliable in some ways than hard disk drives, than what we call spinning media. Those are the ones with mechanical internals. SSDs are solid state devices. They use memory that's just crystals. In other words, you're just putting information out onto solid state devices, onto silicon disks, silicon devices. And what you're doing out there is not subject to loss unless you lose the flash drive. And so if you're carrying around a flash drive, you can do like I used to do when I had any kind of exposure on the data, was I had a big card on it that said my name and my phone number, so that if I left it in a computer at the library or wherever I was working, that they knew where to call me and tell me that they picked up my flash drive. On the other hand, the simplest way to do this is to basically, like I said, make sure you have your flash drive, but when you get any information, you don't store information on that. You just transport information with a flash drive. Use it as a transportable device. Now, if you have an SSD on as your main drive in your computer, then it's the same question about the computer. Question is, will it last any longer? The answer is, if you have an old SSD and an old computer, you're still running into the 5 or 6 year old issue, no matter how you look at it. You know, we talk about dogs' lives, that they, in a sense, live faster than human beings, that their lives are worth so many human lives. Humans compared to like a giant sequoia or something, you know, maybe humans have an extremely fast life. Computers have a very fast life, not only through destruction, crashes, but also because of what we call the upgrades, things that happen in the technology, that changes the technology. And one of the most serious problems I've ever had in losing data, almost losing data, has been program upgrades on programs that make older versions of the programs unreadable. And I have run into that time and again, even though I am aware of it, and I will put something in a program and I'll come back to it and find out that the current version of the program will not open that data and cannot be used. And that's one of the biggest problems we have with one of the old genealogy programs, which is a personal ancestral file. It's not supported, hasn't been supported for a long period of time. And those people who maintain and keep their personal ancestral file are one day uniformly going to find out that there are no programs that will directly open that personal ancestral file, even though we have some very good pathways to do that today. Loss, I've already mentioned that. Just losing the data, losing it because you lose the drive. You can always lose your paper records, your computer to a disaster such as a fire, which is, people say, well, now I have it all. I have all my paper records, and so I'm safe. And the answer is, yeah, if you want to try to transcribe them all again, that's safe. But on the other hand, they're just as likely to be destroyed as a computer is if there's a fire or a disaster. Today we have extremely limited visibility on this the day that this class is being given in the Utah Valley in Provo, Utah, because of the fires in California. Now, if you go on the news and look at what's being burned out there are people losing their computers. Let's just say they're losing paper records and computers because they're losing every last thing in their house down to the foundation. This is kind of the end product of why we talk about the digital death, and that is that your family may not know what you do with your computer information and paper or care and throw it all away. So what would happen if, when you got disabled or died and your children came in, or your relatives, or whoever is your friends, or whoever it is that you're living with and maintaining, just says, oh, I can't get in, I don't know the login for this computer, I guess we'll just have to reset it. So they just reset your whole computer. So everything you've done and have everything you on your computer is now gone. And in addition to that, all of the hard drives attached to your computer, when you plug them in, all of your files are encrypted because you put a password on everything, and so nobody can get into anything, and so they just throw it all away. Well, that's not a hypothetical. That is a reality. That's actually something that happens all over again. So just a few more words about physical equipment failure or destruction. The equipment itself is not going to last forever. Within the last, this is something that's so common that I encounter so commonly that it just becomes an over kind of situation where I get upset internally because this happens, because I really talk to people constantly and I say, well, what version of the computer, when did you get your computer? Well, I don't remember. I know it's been about 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years since I bought that computer. And I said, well, let's look. And so we go up under the, whatever it is on the particular, on an Apple or Windows computer and or Android device, and we look and see when the device, what the serial number is and when it was created. You can look up all that kind of stuff you can look up online. Oh, well, you bought this 10 years ago. Oh, yeah, I guess I did. 10 years ago, huh? Yeah. Well, you are living on a sheet of ice that is melting, basically, when you get into that kind of situation, because the chances that your equipment is going to keep going is very, very slim. So let's give you an analogy. What if I never upgraded my equipment? People say it's too much of a bother. I'm not upgrading anything. I'm just clicking off those upgrades. I'll just keep working. It keeps working. My computer still works. Well, the answer to that's the same thing that would happen if you owned a car, an automobile, and you simply said, well, I'm not going to do any maintenance to the car. I'll just keep driving. I think they're just overreaching when they're telling me I have to change my oil and I have to take care of any of the parts on the car. You and I, if you're serious about it, understand that if you kept doing that for a protracted period of time, that it would very soon, your car would no longer function. Now, it may run for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles, just like a computer may work for years and years. That does not mean the chances of there's something going wrong do not increase. And that's just a simple fact of life. So the list of ways that this equipment can fail are endless, from power surges to lightning to physical destruction through fire, through excessive heat, just about anything you can think of that would be harmful to you as an individual, if you were standing there, is also dangerous to your computer. One thing that you may never, a lot of people, they're smoking today, cigarette smoking today is not as common as it once was. And back when it was very common and we were replacing computers, we discovered an interesting fact, is that excessive smoke, especially excessive cigarette smoke, that it contained a lot of tars. It's the tars part. The computer doesn't care about the nicotine. It doesn't care about the cancer-causing agents. It's not going to die. But the computers have internal circulation, a fan that pulls air into the computer, even if you can't hear it, but it's there, and it's pulling that information in. And there's a high electrical charge inside your computer, very high charges, and they attract smoke particles. So if you live in a very smoky or dusty environment, I can tell you from having opened up computers that have done that, that is a disastrous mess. Inside your computer can look black, solid black, with smoke and other things that may be in the air. So keep it clean. Avoid that kind of an environment, because those are the kinds of things that can help. And now, what's the levels of profession? How do we preserve all of this stuff? Now that we've talked about all the bad things that can happen, how are we going about doing this? Well, over on this screenshot that I have, or this image that I have over here, I have paper. I have an internal hard drive. Well, it's there as a hard drive. I have old floppy disks. I have a variety of different SSD or solid state devices, flash drives, memory disks, and all sorts of things. And we have a CD or a DVD, that technology. Well, CD and DVD technology, CDs and DVDs, their argument, they were touted for many years back when they became popular as being, oh, the ultimate preservation. Put your stuff on CDs. And the answer is not so great. After they managed to get some time period working on those, they're generally not going to be working after, unless they're put into a pristine environment and kept like in the refrigerator kind of thing. Not really, but don't want to put them in a refrigerator, but in a very isolated environment, it's very unlikely that they'll last an extended period of time, let's say more than 10 years. They start to degrade just because the substances they're made out of degrade. If you've ever looked at old plastic, or you've ever looked at anything that's really old, you'll know it becomes brittle and it becomes basically useless. So there's a time limit on all of these. Of course, floppy disks are almost extinct. And CDs, by the way, are almost extinct. None of the new computers that I'm aware of, unless you specifically ask for it or find one that has it, have CD-ROM drives any longer, or DVD drives. But they, you can plug them in, you can still buy them, and you can still buy a disk drive, by the way, a floppy disk drive for your computer if you want one. And it will work onto your USB port. Question is, can you read anything that you have on an old floppy disk? And the answer is probably no. It probably won't. The data will be just say file. It'll say, look for a file online for this program or whatever, and you won't be able to read what it says. So here's kind of the levels of the backup that help you to preserve your information. The low-level backup equals a flash drive. Why? Because it's portable, because it's easy, they're cheap, they're limited size now, they're growing into larger sizes. And let me mention one thing, because if you go on to a big, like Amazon, for example, and you say, well, I want a really big flash drive, you're going to find a whole bunch of people selling what they're calling 1 terabyte or even 2 terabyte, just a huge, massive set, more memory than most people would use in their lifetime for $60 or $50 or $25 or $10 or something like that. But they're totally fraudulent. There's no way anybody's making a 1 terabyte flash drive today for anything under $100 to the $200 range, depending on the branch. Always read the reviews. If there are no reviews, you don't buy it. If there's all the reviews say, this is the best thing that ever happened, and there's 5 reviews, you figure out they're all relatives of the manufacturer and you don't buy it. If there's 2,000 reviews and 1% or 2% of the reviews say that it doesn't work, then that's probably 1 or 2% who have no clue or have had a bad experience that has nothing to do with really the quality of the product. So look at that kind of stuff. But flash drives, they're perfectly not good. The biggest problem with them is they're small and they get misplaced. And so the best way to get a flash drive is to put it on a lanyard like this, meaning a big thing like that, or a ribbon, or whatever you want to call it. And then it's not so likely to get stuffed or dropped or whatever. So that's one way to do it. Mid-level backup is an external hard drive. That means you back it up to maybe a flash drive and an external hard drive, that you put an external hard drive on your computer and back up everything every day, all day long. And then you have 2 places to keep it. That's kind of the medium way of doing it. That can be extended by having multiple hard drives like I do. You can get hysterical about it, but if you have as much data as I have, you'd probably be hysterical also. So then you go back to high-level backup, and that's an external hard drives and online offsite backup. And there are a lot of different services out there, and that's one way to do it. You just simply pay a monthly fee, usually not a whole lot of money, and that backs up all your data. The question I always ask is, how much would you pay someone to redo all of your data? How much would you pay if someone was tasked, yourself, if yourself, would you pay? How much would you think you were worth to redo all the data that you've ever created and that you have stored on your computer? And then ask yourself if it's worth paying X dollars per month that you don't have to do that. So that's really that's kind of the same argument that they make for insurance, but and the other side usually don't, if you have insurance, we're not talking about property and loss insurance. We're talking about ultimate, like life insurance kind of stuff. If you have life insurance, you don't get to enjoy the benefits. Your relatives do. Okay. Apple has a program called Time Machine. And Time Machine, if you have a dedicated external hard drive, that means there's a drive that's only your Time Machine drive. You can put other stuff on a Time Machine drive, by the way, but I would kind of discourage that unless you absolutely know what you're doing. But I would suggest just buying a hard drive that is about the same size or about 1.5 times the size of your internal hard drive. So if you have a 1 terabyte internal hard drive, buy a 2 terabyte external hard drive. If you have a 500 gigabyte internal hard drive on your laptop, buy a 1 terabyte external drive and use that plugged into your computer every day, as long as your computer's on, and then start Time Machine, or the alternative on Windows is called Windows Backup and Restore. And either one of those programs will simply take all the information on your hard drive, your internal hard drive, and put it onto that external hard drive. That gives you a 100%, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a increased percentage of possibility that your drive will be preserved. Now, here's the problem with that. If your house burns down, it doesn't matter if you have an external hard drive attached to your computer. Those hard drives are gone, or that hard drive is gone. So one thing you need to do is, well, let's start with this. You have to learn how to back up your main computer and get somebody to help you do it. Either go through a YouTube video that shows you how to get to use either the Apple programs or use the PC programs, and then make sure you do it and understand it, and how to retrieve it if you have to retrieve it. One of the things about having it on a backup like that is a benefit. A side benefit is that you are being able to retrieve a file that you lose. For example, I have files that mysteriously disappear. I just cannot understand. I search the entire computer, I do all sorts of things, and I go, I have no idea where that file went. So then I can go back to my time machine, because I'm on Apple, and I can go back to the time just after I made the file, or the last time I saved the file, and see if I can retrieve it off the desktop. And there it is. In other words, it's now been preserved on that particular backup copy of the computer. So that doesn't happen very frequently, but when it does, it's always kind of the ultimate, well, after you've been tearing your hair out trying to find the file, and like usually my wife Ann says, have you looked on Time Machine? And I go, oh yeah, Time Machine. So, oh, there it is. Okay, save the day. Thanks. And so that's kind of the way, but you need to know how to use those programs, and so learn to use them. And then, as I've tried to say, consider paying for an online backup storage. Just consider it. This is a question of maximizing your winnings and minimizing your losses. It's a minimax. Basically, by getting an online storage capability, you maximize your gain. That is, you keep your information, and you minimize the losses. Because if you have the ultimate loss when your house is completely destroyed and your computers are all destroyed, or they're stolen, or they're whatever, and you no longer have the device, you can buy a new computer and restore all the information to your new computer from the backup on the online backup storage. But you really, once again, this is another area where you need to go out and study, look and see exactly what they support, how it works, how much it costs. And the real question is how the pros and cons. So let's look at it. First of all, they're fee-based. That means that you're paying a monthly fee, and that could be anywhere from a couple of dollars, $5 to $10, or it could be more significant to that. It just depends on the service and what they provide. And in some cases, the cost depends on your amount of storage. There's a few places which for a set fee will cover everything on your computer and all your hard drives attached. Everything gets restored. And in my case, that's running about 15 terabytes of information, between 15 and 16 terabytes. And terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. Yeah. So in most cases, for me, it's reasonable to do that because I have so much. The second part of that, it may be low. The fee, the monthly backup fee may be low, but there may be a significantly higher charge to restore the data. In other words, if your computers all get lost and you have to restore all of that data to all of the devices, then you basically have to pay an increased amount of money, which, by the way, may be in the hundreds, if not into the thousands of dollars, depending on how much information you have. But so you're, in a sense, it's like insurance, because you're betting that you're going to keep able to maintain all your hard drives and materials, and they're betting that they're going to crash, but they don't. care really, because percentage wise, there's going to be enough crashes to keep them in business. Always do your research before signing up with a service. Don't just go out there and pick the first one that has high reviews. Go out and find out which ones are the best ones and which ones are the ones. And by the way, I'm not going to tell you, not in this presentation, which one to buy, because I know what works for me, but it may not work for you. And I think you really need to go out and talk to people and talk about the service. And there are hundreds of companies out there. There are dozens and dozens that advertise heavily. So it's just something out there that's available. Now, when we get to the end product of all this, and as we all grow older each day, the real issue is what happens if to your data and the information and everything you've done if you pass on. Now, the old days, everything that these people did, like my great-grandmothers, 2 of them, who were very much involved in genealogy, both created massive collections of documents. And my one great-grandmother, my grandmother Overson, she had a huge amount of text material. She turned it all into a book that she wrote. And the book is about 600 pages long, and it's got photographs and a lot of information in it. And so a lot of, to the sense that book was published, she had multiple copies of it, and it's now been digitized, and the book is now available on Family Search. So from that standpoint, her primary information was saved, but she was also a professional photographer and took thousands and thousands of photographs. And basically, from my perspective, and as a photographer and as a genealogist and as a lawyer, I couldn't find her information. I had no idea where those photographs were. And then out of the blue, someone called me and said they had them, and I was able to retrieve them, digitize them, and provide a home for them at the University of Arizona. So there's this process that you need to go through, and other things. There's rampant stories among the genealogical societies and the community that I have been around now for 40 plus years, is that you're always on this thing where there's somebody carrying a box to the dumpster to throw away all the work that this person did in their entire life, and somebody sees it and grabs the box and saves it. We don't know how many of those boxes have been lost. And I have very frequently, within, let's say, regularly, I get inquiries from people saying, what do I do with all my stuff? Where does it go? How do I get rid of it? What do I do with it? My children don't want it. They don't have any interest in it at all. No one's expressed any interest at all. And so I say, well, yeah, what can I do? And I have the same problem. And everyone who is in this position has the same problem. So what do you do? And this is the other thing, disabuse yourself of the idea that somebody wants the stuff. Family Search does not want it. No library around that I'm aware of, or archive or repository that I know, wants the stuff, unless you do some very specific things, and unless you have some very specific type of information. The answer is, unless you can show some specific historical value. The photographs, by the way, were begun back in the 1850s from my great-grandmother and continued up to the 1940s, almost 100 years of photographs by her father, by other photographers, and she herself, who was a photographer, by her. And so basically, they had historical significance, and the University of Arizona recognized that and even requested from me. They approached me about housing the collection. Now, that's not going to happen with your run-of-the-mill pile of family group sheets and a bunch of certificates. That's just not going to happen. Your photocopies of historical records that you paid for, like from the General Record Office in England or wherever, they're just of no value. Nobody wants to put that in their museum because it's, or their archive, because it's just paper that's replaceable. So the real answer is it digitized and is it available? And if it's digitized and available, then it has no physical value to the extent. Now, it may have sentimental value. Don't throw away photographs, because a photograph is still an actual artifact that shows a person and has a connection to their life. But a piece of paper that was notes or records or family group records or research notes or any of that kind of information is just simply not going to have a preservation value as such. This is what nobody wants. Nobody wants printed or copied readily available records. Okay. So if you've got records, copies of people's birth certificates and things like that, none of that is going to be records. The only time, let's say, what's the difference between a paper record that has historical value and a paper record that has no historical value? Well, let's say I have a copy of a deed from my grandfather, my great-grandfather, that was his. I have a copy. Now that's the magic word. When a person says, I have a copy of, that word tells me right there that that particular document is not the original. Now, what if it's a deed? If it's a recorded deed, then there's a copy of it already with the recorder's office. Unless you, and even if you have the original deed with the original signatures, that may have more, let's call it emotional attachment value than a copy at the recorder's office or a photocopy or a photographic copy or a digital copy of the document. But it doesn't have any more genealogical historical research value because the same information is contained in all of the different copies. Exactly the same. So that's why we say if I can go someplace online or wherever to some office someplace in the world and get another copy of the record, then it's not unique. It's really not as valuable as another, like a first edition of a book or an original document, with the original signature of someone who was recognizably extremely famous. Now, for a family, a document signed by your great-great-great-great-grandfather may be extremely valuable and become an heirloom, an artifact that has value within the family. And as a saleable document, if you were going to put it out on the market, it still might have some value. Old stock certificates, old deeds, any of those kinds, people collect those, and they have a collectible, but they're nothing to do with genealogy. It's all to do with history. Family group sheets and pedigree charts. People always come in and claim to me that none of this information is online. And when I ask the question of whether all of this information that their grandmother or their mother or their sister or whoever put together, if it's readily available, they say, no, it's not online. She did the original research. She hired the guy in Germany, or she hired the English radiologist, and they did this research and they paid money for the research. And my answer is, where did they get it? Out of the records. Oh, well, then it's not unique. It's reproducible. Okay, family photos with no historical value except to the family. This is what I just explained. Keepsakes and memorabilia. If you think they're valuable, try selling them online. That's the only thing I can suggest. We don't have time today to get into collectibles. I started into the collectible business as stamp collecting when I was a little over 8 years old. And I bought and sold collectibles for a good portion of my life, and I know a tremendous amount about the collectible market, from antiques to stamps and coins to almost anything. And if this was, if this is a lock of your great grandmother's hair, see if you can find somebody to do a DNA analysis on it. If it's a letter that's signed by your great grandfather, or his original journal or whatever, see if somebody wants it. See if one of the archives or university special collections or somebody would like to document, simply because it's old and because it has some basis connection to the area where it was created. But if they're just things that have been around, they have tremendous sentimental value, but they have almost no absolute value. Research notes and notebooks, unless you yourself are willing to go through the research notes and notebooks and take out any information, as I did with my grandmother's research, my great-grandmother's research notebooks, and take out all the information that's valuable, they don't have any other value beyond that, other than they're an artifact that were in her handwriting and you may want to preserve. Okay, so anything else that doesn't happen to fall in any of these categories has got to be addressed in the same way. What might they want? If you were going to try to give this to an archive or a library, what would they want? They would want original correspondence to and from a noteworthy or famous individuals, even local famous individuals, original settlers, pioneers, anybody who has real historical context to go with their lives, or were prominent in some way, or a benefit to the community, or have a university named after them, or whatever it is. Basically, that's the kind of thing that they're wanting to preserve, unless it's a very unusual product. For instance, records of enslaved people, regardless, are going to have some historical value. It doesn't even matter who or where or when, because of the context of where those records were created. Correspondence that came from someone who was participating in a war, someone during the Civil War, or someone during the Vietnam War, or someone during the Korean or the World War I, World War II, any of the major conflicts on the world. If you have correspondence that was from the person who was actually participating in that event, then those become extremely valuable. Photos, artifacts, same thing, same measure of thing. Journals, diaries, letters. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, missionary journals are extremely valuable and will be preserved by lots of different repositories. Journals and diaries of other kinds may have historical interest, and especially if they are available and can be studied and information can be retrieved from them, then basically they are going to be extremely valuable. Rare or first edition books. That's always the case, and there's a whole industry there on its own. And here again, age is one of the criteria. The older something is, the more likely it is to have some value, just simply by the fact that it had been preserved and is available. Okay, first thing, you need to know what you have. You really do need to know what you have, and you can digitize it all, and then you need to go through and identify everything that you're working with and everything that's there available. So what do you do with all the stuff? I don't know. If you can answer that question, give me a call or send me a note and let me know what to do with it. But I have piles and piles, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of pages of documents that are that are fall into all the different categories. And so basically what I've been doing lately for a long time, for like the last 20 or 30 years, is going through all that material, digitizing every last piece, and then categorizing and getting rid of the things that I could to libraries and archives, which has been successful in some cases. And in the other, and from the residual amount of information there, I'm now in the, if this isn't really valuable, it goes in the trash. So that's the basis. And I have raised the issue with all of my family members and said, if you want it, you better tell me about it. So digitize everything. That's really it, because you can then continue to put that stuff up on Family Search. There are some limits as to the quantity of stuff you can put on Family Search in some categories, but then it will be preserved and available and tagged. If you tag it all to the individuals, then it's basically ready to go. So Family Search is a good way to do that, even though it seems pretty difficult to think that something like Ancestry or even MyHeritage would somehow end and lose their information. From my perspective, Family Search is the most secure place. Here's one alternative if you happen to have a lot of books. Some of us over their lifetimes have been very, have collected hundreds, maybe thousands of books. The Internet Archive, as influenced by this article, and you can look for it online, basically will take one book or a whole library. And they have a reason. They digitize all of it. They make it available, completely available online. If it's copyright protected, they are a library and they will check out the books. Otherwise, everything gets preserved. So the best way to get your library, not having to dump it out or sell it to somebody or sell it, give it to a thrift store or whatever, the best way to do it is to contact, work through the Internet Archive to get rid of your book or your library altogether. Publish books, and then make sure the book is digitized and put online on Family Search or on the Internet Archive, one of the two. And if you have something of real historical time, talk to special collections, libraries, museums, historical societies, and archives about their interests in the items. And I've done this over the years, helped numerous people with the process, have taken individual documents to the archives and had them put into archives or collections. So this is something that's viable, but I have to tell you, you need to do your homework. You need to know what you have, and you need to know how to present it so that you can, that you have a way to understand the historical connection that there is between that. And this is the photographic collection from my great-grandmother that I mentioned earlier. If you want to, you can leave a last will and testament, and after you've digitized everything and you have all the originals, you can direct how they're going to be kept. As an attorney who did estates and probates for many, many years, of almost the entire years I was practicing law, I basically call a will a wish list. It's what you wish would happen, but you're not sure it ever will. And that's particularly true about the physical aspects of what you give people in a will. If you give them furniture and all that, they're just going to get rid of it unless they have a space for it and a place for it, and then they really have some kind of attachment to it. And it's really a good idea to determine that before you die. And make sure you involve your whole family in the decision about what you do with the family records. Send out certified letters if you have to. I mean, if you've got that kind of a family, but have a discussion going on that says, this is what we're doing. This is how it's going to be handled. If you want the stuff, come and get it now because it will be gone. That's kind of the attitude. I have friends who are going around putting different colored spot notes, the stick-em notes on everything in the house, depending on who wants what. That way, there's no question when you die, they come in and get their red dot stuff or their blue dot stuff or their green dot stuff, and everybody's happy and nobody sits there and fights over it. You take the time to think about what's going to happen before you can't think. That's probably the best way that I can put that. Thanks for watching.